We had a bit of a push to get referred in the first place because our audiologist, he didn't want us to go through the journey if we didn't have to, was basically it. But Daniel's always been very much, particularly in his right ear, was always borderline on his levels. So with a bit of help, he spoke to the Auditory Implant Service, and Julie from the Elizabeth Foundation was involved as well, and they said to refer Daniel over. The first few appointments were very nerve-wracking for me and my husband because Daniel, again, was always picking up on that borderline level. So I think we ended up having about 4 different hearing tests at the start of the assessment process before getting on to the next level. We were told after that we could be discharged from the Southampton Auditory Implant Service because Daniel wasn't on at the levels for criteria, and asked for a second opinion referral, or they would offer to retest Daniel in about a month and a half after that. So we chose to go for the additional hearing test, and luckily for us at that point they had agreed on the levels being from 90, which meant Daniel's right ear was within criteria for us, which obviously after that appointment we walked out and we were very relieved, and it seemed things started to move very quickly for us then.
We knew obviously at 9 months that Alyssa wasn't hearing with the hearing aids. The decision to go ahead with the assessment for the cochlear implant was quite a straightforward process for us. We didn't have anything to lose really. We were told about the risks of the operation and that potentially it might not work, but that talking to other families who had been through the process and the operation, that they had only had positive experiences of it, so we were very willing to give it a try.
So Henry's assessment process was a little bit more tricky because his hearing loss, we didn't know at the beginning, was progressive, and it was very quick progressive. So we would be given the hearing aids and he would try them for a few weeks, and I was just convinced that he couldn't hear. So myself and my husband knew for a long time before it was able to be proved that he was in criteria for the implant. So it was just a waiting game of hearing tests and Henry not responding, more hearing aids, still no response. So it went on a little bit longer than we'd hoped for, but once we had a yes, things moved quite quickly, and I think as he was approaching 18 months, they were keen to get him implanted as he hadn't had any sound for quite some time.
I think with the assessment process, my husband was, from the beginning, he's having an implant. And I was a bit more, we need to be really sure it's the right thing, we need to see how hearing aids are doing. But then the more we learnt about, even if he had a little bit of hearing, what the hearing aids could give him still wouldn't put him into the range where you can hear speech. We learnt that with the implant he would have access to all the speech sounds, all environmental sounds. So once that was the case, then we were desperate for him to go through the assessment process and be eligible.
So we'd had some discussions with our key contacts from the implant centre. We picked Southampton. A few other people that we knew whose children had cochlear implants were under Southampton and said that they were very good and found them very helpful. We had, I think, 4 or 5 trips to Southampton as part of the assessment process to have the cognitive tests, lots of hearing tests, as a psychological test. I think it started in May, and we had the assessment days fairly quickly, I think between sort of May, June, July. We had to wait for the MRI scan, which was at the end of August. That was quite nerve-wracking, and then I think she went to have the MRI and that took about an hour and a half, so we just had to wait in a waiting room. But it all went okay, she came around fine. And then after that it was waiting for the outcome of the assessment for the cochlear implants. We were a bit nervous as to whether we were going to be given the go-ahead to go through with it or not. And she had the operation in November 2014, and then a month later she had this switch on in December 2014.
We never felt like we had to make the decision. We knew that was what we wanted for Henry. We knew Henry needed the surgery. We found the assessment process, I found some of the appointments difficult. We had to talk about how we felt, and I found that one quite difficult, but it was so lovely at the users meeting where we met an adult and a child who have been implanted, and it was so lovely to see how well they were doing. We were just desperate for it all to move quite quickly and just to get it done, really. The MRI took a long time. We had to wait a long time for that. And then after that was done, it all moved really quickly. Yeah, we got our date, which was very nerve-wracking. But it couldn't have gone better. It couldn't have gone more smooth. I think you worry about everything, but actually it's a lot easier than you think it's going to be.
We were given so much information by the University of Southampton, which was initially quite daunting, all the amount of paperwork and packs and stuff you have to read. Once I was more familiar with what was going to happen, we used to look and know where we were up to and what we had to do next, which helped. But I don't know whether it would have been more useful at the beginning to have a bit more of a timeline, or whether that would have been too much information, because there's so much going on, and actually it's better to kind of go through it one step at a time. We didn't even know that this was an option, but yeah, once we learned more about the implants, then we knew that's what we wanted to do.
It wasn't that difficult for us to make the decision to go ahead with an implant. The benefits coming to the Elizabeth Foundation we'd see with an implant. The benefits coming to implants and the results they were getting and how well they were doing in their language and their communication and everything. So yeah, it wasn't a hard decision for either me or my husband.